Hello my friends, in this video we will be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and even GED match results of a Stone Age individual from Brazil, a Stone Age Brazilian Native American genome from Brazil. So let's get into this individual. First of all, this is what this sample scores with G25. It's a sample from 96 centuries before present in Brazil. It's labeled Lapo do Santo. The sample name is CP18, and it is closest to Mix, Mayan, and Bolivian Native Americans. I had to look up what Mix are, and Mix are apparently indigenous people of Mexico who live in the Eastern Highlands in the state of, it's difficult to pronounce this, I'm going to butcher this, Oaxaca. Okay, and they speak the mixed languages, which are classified in a mixed Zoc language family and are more culturally conservative than any other indigenous group of the region, maintaining their language to this day. Very, very interesting for sure. So they are actually similar to various Central Americans to this day. So from what I understand with G25, G25 does not really differentiate. There isn't much of a difference between the typical score of a Central American versus like a South American with G25, so they kind of score the same thing. So like essentially they just score the same thing with G25. Let's see what this individual, Lapo do Santo individual from 96 centuries before present, scores with Gedrosia Iran Neolithic K6. I am unfortunately banned from GED match. I would like to show you what they score with Gedrosia K3 and Ancient Eurasia K6. I would really like to see how much Ancient North Eurasian ancestry this individual has, but unfortunately I cannot show you this because I am banned from GED match. If you, I'm gonna leave the link to download this file in the description of the video, so you can actually download this file and you can check that for yourself. So there you can still do that yourself, but I'm not gonna do it myself. So it's not gonna be me who does this. With Gedrosia Iran Neolithic K6, this individual scores 61% East Asian, 20% Western hunter-gatherer, 13% Iran Neolithic, and 3.5% ancestral South Eurasian, 1.5% Natufian, and 1% Sub-Saharan African. Very interesting model. Closest to Clovis, Pima, and what's interesting is that after Clovis and Pima, which are Native Americans, come Kyrgyz and Altaians, which are actually Eurasians, which are Central Asian people in Central Asia. I think this kind of a mixture of ancient North Eurasian and East Eurasian admixture makes Native Americans sort of resemble peoples of Central Asia in a way. It's an artificial resemblance between Native Americans and inhabitants of Central Asia. That's just my opinion. Uh, What's interesting, the closest model is actually a mixture of Mongola plus Afontova Gara 3. You can see the mixture is 65% Mongol plus 34% Afontova Gara 3. So from this, we can assume that maybe this individual has around 1/3 ancient North Eurasian admixture, 34% Afontova Gara 3, around 1/3 ancient North Eurasian admixture. Let's see, what else do we see here? We see line number 9, 62% Ulchi plus 13.7% of Fontova Gara 3. So Ulchi would be like an East Eurasian, once again, East Asian source of ancestry, plus around 40 or 38% of Fontova Gara, around 38% ancient North Eurasian admixture. Once again, this really falls in line with what we already know about the genetics of Native Americans. They are around 40% ancient North Eurasian in general. So this person is around 38 to 40% ancient North Eurasian, as it is typical for Native Americans to score. This person's scoring typical stuff for various Native American groups. It is not that different from a typical Native American result. Line number 4, we see a similar result. We see 63% Han plus 37% ancient North Eurasian, Fontova Gara 3. Once again, pretty typical, pretty standard result for a Native American. And we see that it is a standard result for Native American because the closest fit is to Clovis, and the fit is actually pretty close at 3.529. It's a pretty close fit. So let's see what this individual scores with my own ethnicity calculator that I've developed myself. This will be definitely very interesting to see. And here he is closest to Anzik Amerindian, followed by Onge Jarava, which is very deranged, followed by Upper Paleolithic individual from Mongolia, followed by Filipino, followed by Mongol, then Sri Lankan, then Jamon from Japan, then Polynesian, then Chinese. So it's kind of all over the place, but Anzic Amerindian is kind of good. Anzic Amerindian is good. And the closest mixture is Korean plus Kenya Pastoralis Neolithic, which is really, really all over the place. The second closest mixture is Salkit Upper Paleolithic Mongolia plus Mongol, then Tibetan plus Kenya Pastoralis Neolithic, then Yakutia Neolithic plus Kenya Pastoralis Neolithic. So it is really all over the place. It is really, really all over the place, especially the two-way models. Really, really all over the place. But it is good that it managed to identify this individual as being closest to Anzic Amerindian. I consider that as a win for my own trait predictor, and that was determined with 319 SNPs. Okay, let's close that. Now let's get into the really, really fun part of this video, the haplogroups. The haplogroups for this individual is the mitochondrial haplogroup for this individual is A2. The closest branch is A2C64T, which doesn't tell me anything. I don't know much about mitochondrial lineage, let alone A2. And the Y-DNA for this individual is Q1. Q1 is a pretty widespread branch, and it is by far the most dominant branch among Native Americans. It is pretty much the only branch that Native Americans score. There was some kind of, I think there was an extinction of all the other branches of haplogroups that existed, and Native Americans ended up with essentially only Q1 haplogroups. The only branches that exist among Native Americans are Q1. So this is no surprise. All Native American samples that are male have Q1. Q1 is actually related very closely to my own haplogroup, which is R1A. R1A and Q1 share a common ancestor in the Paleolithic period. So, in a very recent time period, they had a very recent common ancestor, 20k years before present. So this individual is literally, you could say, my brother, my distant brother, because Q and R, these haplogroups both descend from P, and we share a very recent common ancestor. Closer, Q and R are more closely related than any other haplogroup is to R. Like, there is no haplogroup that is closer related to R than Q. Okay, and now we're going to move on to Nashakot calculator results, what this individual looks like. Let's see what his predicted phenotype is. So it looks like he actually has brown eye color. Very interesting. So he actually has brown and not dark brown eye color, which is really big, really surprising, because for Native Americans, Native Americans tend to have dark brown eye color, but his eye color is regular brown, not even dark brown. And of course, there is 0% likelihood of blue eyes, pretty much 0 for blue eyes when centered, pretty much 0 for green, 2% for hazel, which is really big. 2% likelihood for hazel eyes for a Native American is really, really big. But he's got 51% likelihood of brown eyes and 46% likelihood of darkest brown eyes. So he most likely has brown eyes, actually. And for hair color likelihood distribution, he most likely has black hair. So he's quite dark for hair color. And for skin color likelihood distribution, he most likely has olive or Mediterranean skin. So he's actually quite dark in terms of pigmentation of skin. Olive, but olive skin for Native Americans, I don't know if it's not even dark. Olive skin for Native Americans, I would say, is light. They tend to be light brown in general. So olive skin for Native Americans, I'd say it's light. And hair texture looking straight. 84% likelihood, 68% likelihood of straight hair. Okay, and for nose shape is looking very snub, so definitely snub nose shape here. Definitely not Greek nose shape, definitely very snub nose shape. For coloring related variants found in the file, let's see, only one light color variant here in this variation of HERC2. But what do we see here? We see 2 light color variants here. This is very, very surprising. So this individual actually has blue eye haplotype 3. And this is really, really uncommon. It's not even all that common for Europeans. Like, it's a very Northern European mutation. And it's surprising that a Native American has this kind of a genotype. It's actually really, really unusual and weird. That's really, really weird. That's actually so weird. What? I really want to see what he scores with the snipper free, because this is really, really, really weird. He might score hazel eye color with snipper free because of this. Because this is really weird. Okay. And he has blue eye haplotype 1 as well. So he has blue eye haplotype 1 and blue eye haplotype 3. The only thing he's missing now is blue eye haplotype 2. If he's got blue eye haplotype 2, he's got the whole package. If he had blue eye haplotype 2, he would literally have probably lighter. Well, he wouldn't have blue eyes, but he would have some kind of maybe hazel or lighter eye color. He wouldn't have blue eyes because of this and stuff like this. So he still wouldn't have blue eyes, but he would have lighter eye color. But this is crazy. I mean, he has blue haplotype 3, which is absolutely insane. It's such a Northern European thing to have, and it's absolutely insane that he as a Native American has this type of a genotype. I mean, it's breaks all the stereotypes for sure. And also he has a light color variant in this variation of MC1R, so he's also predisposed to ginger hair. So he has a predisposition to ginger. He has ginger variants in MC1R. Okay, so let's see what he scores with snipper free. I'm really curious to see what he scores for that. It might even say hazel. I'm not sure, but it might say hazel, which would be crazy. It would be crazy if it said hazel. No, it says brown, but it's 21.9 times more likely brown than hazel, but which is kind of close. With snipper free, 21.9 is close. So it was close for hazel. It was almost hazel, you could say. You know, it's pretty close. All right, let's see the phenotype oracle. And the phenotype oracle for this individual is looking very, very East Eurasian. For the mixtures, for the mixtures of phenotypes, looks like a mixture of kind of like a Turanid or a I guess Central Asian mixture plus East Eurasian, Central Asian plus East Eurasian, Central Asian plus East Eurasian, or not even Central Asian. It looks kind of European actually. I mean, I guess it has a Central Asian vibe to it, but it looks pretty European. So this person is, you could even classify him as mixed race. You could even classify this individual as mixed race, to be honest, because like this type of genotype in blue eye haplotype 3 and scoring like this in GED match. I think Lapo dos Santo CP18 definitely falls into the classification for mixed race, at least by my standards. I don't think I can count him as fully East Eurasian. Okay, and definitely very interesting phenotype mixtures here. All right, now let's see the biomarkers results. What does he score for the biomarkers panel? Looks like he's got slightly above average odds for vitamin D levels, slightly above average vitamin D levels, slightly below average levels of LDL cholesterol, which is really good to see. I like seeing below average levels of LDL cholesterol, slightly below average HDL cholesterol levels, really good to see. Slightly above average levels of glucose, really good. Slightly above average hemoglobin, which is not so good. Slightly below average blood pressure, which is good. Looks like nothing was found for iron. It's not a very high quality file, so not a lot was found for iron. Looks like a slightly above average level of sex hormone binding globulin. Looks like slightly below average level of red blood cell count in blood. Slightly below average number of base pairs for the telomere length, which is okay, and definitely below average height, which is very interesting because I noticed that Hispanics and Latinos of various kinds tend to be short. Latinos tend to be, for males, they tend to be around 5'6", 5'7", maybe on average. For females, it's even shorter. So it's no surprise that, I mean, I'm not surprised that this individual is predicted to be so much below average in height. There's a lot more Lapo dos Santos samples I'm going to cover, and we'll see if they all have this tendency to be shorter. It's going to be very interesting for me to see if they all have this tendency to be short. But it looks like this individual definitely has a predisposition to be a little bit shorter than average. All right, now let's see the polygenic risk scores. Okay, looks like he has a predisposition to slightly below average odds of kidney disease. No risk variance for hemoglobin E disease, but nothing was found. Slightly below average odds for migraine, average odds for lupus, very low odds for gout, slightly above average odds for thyroid cancer, no very low odds for eczema, average odds for exfoliation glaucoma and primary congenital glaucoma, below average odds for polycystic ovary syndrome, below average odds for cataracts, below average odds for age-related macular degeneration, very high odds for rheumatoid arthritis. Let's look it up actually. Rheumatoid arthritis. Let's see what contributed to that. So we see one genotype for normal or lower risk of rheumatoid arthritis. We see a genotype for 2 to 3 times increased risk of rheumatoid arthritis. And we see what else? And we see another genotype for lower odds, but that doesn't affect score. Very interesting. All right. Okay. He's got slightly above average odds for Tourette's. He's got very much above average odds for epilepsy, which is very interesting. But that's only based on 2 S&Ps, so maybe not that big of a deal. He's got slightly above average odds for asthma. He's got slightly below average odds for leukemia. He's got slightly above average odds for vitiligo. He's got above average odds for myopia. He's got above average odds for corneal astigmatism. He's got above average odds for primary biliary cirrhosis. He's got below average odds for stroke. He's got below average odds for male pattern hair loss. He's got above average odds for atrial fibrillation. By the way, about the male pattern hair loss, that's quite typical for Native Americans to score below average for that. Like Native Americans don't really go bald all that much. Deep vein thrombosis, nothing relevant was found. For unipolar depression, slightly below average odds for that. Bipolar type 1, above average odds for that. Quite significantly above average, actually. For schizophrenia, significantly above average odds for that. Type 2 diabetes, below average odds for that. Type 1 diabetes, below average odds for that. Alzheimer's, below average odds for Alzheimer's. Multiple sclerosis, below average odds for multiple sclerosis. For breast cancer, no risk variance for breast cancer, really good. Keto G, he's got all the risk variance for testicular cancer and the Keto G variants, so he's definitely quite cooked for testicular cancer. Celiac disease, 2 risk variance for celiac disease out of 4, which is really quite bad. GSS, nothing was found. For Crohn's disease, no risk variance. For Raffenstein's, nothing was found. For Parkinson's, no risk variance. For Gilbert syndrome, no risk variance. For basal cell carcinoma, no risk variance. For Budd-Jaggers, no risk variance. Looks like no risk variance for anything except for allergies, where he's got common risk variance 4 out of 10, which is pretty typical. And no risk variance for anything else, which is really, really good, except for myosclerosis. Myosclerosis, where he's got common risk variance right here. So it's quite healthy. What can we see here that is like atypical or unusual? Maybe slightly high score for bipolar type 1 and schizophrenia. We'll get to that a little bit later. Maybe slightly high score for rheumatoid arthritis, but aside from that, nothing really unhealthy in this result. So let's get into the monogenic traits and explore that a little bit. Looks like he has a predisposition to intermediate phenotype between the warrior and the warrior genotypes. So he's got, if you take into account COMT and MAOA and MAOB, which in this case, there's only 4 genotypes here, but if you take those 4 into account, he's got predisposition to intermediate phenotype between warrior and warrior. Looks like he's got a predisposition to 7 times increased risk of DSPS, which I think is a sleep disorder. When it comes to DRD2 and dopamine D2 receptors, he's got a predisposition to higher number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain, which has some implications in the risk of bipolar and schizophrenia, which does sort of explain the score for bipolar and schizophrenia. For 5-HT and serotonin, looks like he has predisposition to intermediate levels of 5-HT and serotonin. He also has a genotype here, which leads to somewhat higher odds of bipolar and schizophrenia, but it does not play a role in polygenic risk scores. Very, very interesting. For autism, he has a predisposition to higher odds of autism, but I noticed that's typical for a lot of the samples I analyze. For lactose persistence, it looks like he does not carry any derived variants for European lactose persistence. So definitely, if he took an ancestry DNA test, he would not score lactose persistent on it. For OXTR and empathy gene, it looks like he is scoring lower empathy. So if you take these 5 variations into account and their impact on empathy, then he's scoring lower levels of empathy. Hemochromatosis, nothing relevant was found. For Alzheimer's, no risk variance in APOE, which is really good to see. For cardiovascular disease panel, looks like he has a predisposition to Um, actually intermediate odds of cardiovascular issues. Intermediate is the lowest Finke scores here. Highest and lower are equal, and intermediate is the lowest Finke scores. So I'd say that in this case, intermediate is the prediction, is the correct prediction, because it's the average of the three scores. Um, Okay, for facial morphology, let's see what he scores for facial morphology. He has EDAR, so he has partial or full East Asian ancestry based on his genotype and EDAR. He has a genotype for intermediate nose size, decreased odds of protruding nasal bridge, more upturned nose. But remember, he was scoring very much for snub nose shape, very much snub nose shape. Nose drooping down, no, very interesting. And he has a genotype for slightly thicker eyebrows, definitely quite cool. Genotype for missing teeth, likely has no lower odds of missing teeth. Okay, very cool. Doesn't have micropenis, very cool. Impaired muscle performance, likely endurance athlete rather than strength or power athlete, which is really cool. No variance for increased pain sensitivity in SC and 9A, but we'll get to that a little bit later. And now let's get to the pain sensitivity in SC and 9A. SC and 9A gene panel looks like it does not have any variance for increased pain sensitivity here. Zero risk variance of pain hypersensitivity out of 2 total. Well, only 2 were found. Once again, this really speaks volumes about the quality of the file. Unfortunately, this file isn't very high quality. For sex hormone panel, let's get into that a little bit. Looks like he has a genotype for higher levels of testosterone, also one genotype for lower levels of bioavailable testosterone but higher levels of THT, a genotype for higher and lower levels of estradiol, and 2 genotypes for actually one genotype for higher levels of DHT and one genotype for lower levels of DHT. Very interesting. No variants for familial Mediterranean fever. Not a carrier of albinism type 1b. He doesn't carry any risk variants for breast cancer. We already got over that. For MTHFR panel, it looks like he has 2 genotypes that are both heterozygous. Both lead to a slight impaired folate metabolism, a slight impairment in the folate metabolism, which is definitely quite interesting. For alcoholism panel, his risk for alcoholism is slightly below average, which is a little bit surprising because, well, there is no ethnic implication here. The alleles the SNPs that I selected for the alcoholism panel don't really carry like an ethnic implication to them. So I guess I shouldn't be too surprised by this result. For rare diseases and traits panel, this definitely will be very interesting to see. He has a genotype that leads to a higher risk of glaucoma. He has a genotype that leads to risk allele for neural tube defects and spina bifida. He has 2 risk variants for leprosy, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't carry any risk variants for anything else. Okay, no risk variants for Canavan syndrome. He has a genotype in androgen receptor gene AR panel for higher odds of baldness, which is very interesting. It's more typical for Europeans to score that rather than for Native Americans, but I guess it's okay. He scores that as well. And for autoimmune disease, for the HLA panel, looks like he's got lower odds of autoimmune disease. So I think I skipped over the multiple sclerosis panel. It should have been a little bit earlier. Let's scroll past this again. Multiple sclerosis, where was that? Yes, so he doesn't have any risk variants for MS and HLA. He has a genotype that's actually rare that protects from multiple sclerosis, which is really cool. So for the HLA gene, it looks like he's definitely quite good. He's protected from a lot of stuff based on his genotype in HLA, which is really quite good. What about vitiligo? He does have risk variants for vitiligo in HLA, which is very interesting. But that seems like the risk variants for vitiligo in HLA were not enough to really influence the panel in a significant way. He's still scoring mostly lower odds of autoimmune disease, which is really good. For MTRR gene panel, no risk variants for disorders of intracellular collagen metabolism, which is really good to see. And for homocystinuria, he's actually scoring highest for elevated homocysteine levels, which is really bad. But it makes sense. It makes sense because of the heterozygous genotype in MTHFR, which lead to elevated homocysteine levels, and also because he's got a risk variant in here for homocystinuria. So because of that together, because that actually plays a role in the score for homocysteine level panel. Because of that together, he's scoring highest for elevated homocysteine levels, which is definitely quite unhealthy. This is probably the most concerning part of this result: the elevated homocysteine levels. This part probably is the worst thing in this result. But aside from that, he's quite healthy. For muscular dystrophy myopathies, looks like he does not have any risk variance for that. One risk allele here, let's look it up. Is it common? Is it uncommon? I don't know. I don't remember. Um, looks pretty common, so no problem. No problem. No big deal. Color blindness panel, nothing was found. For FTO gene panel, looks like he does not have any fat gene variants in FTO. Really good to see. For syncope panel, based on one SNP, he's got average odds of syncope. For biotraits panel, let's see. He's got 2 copies of the hunter-gatherer CLT-CL1 gene variant, which leads to reduced ability to process carbs and sugars. Definitely quite cool. And for vitamins and levels, what can we talk about here? He's got predisposed to lower levels of vitamin A or retinol. He's got lower levels of vitamin E. He's got lower ascorbic acid. He's got decreased protection of neurons against glutamate toxicity and decreased rate of glutamate degradation. He's got lower red blood cell count, which plays a role in the in the biomarkers panel. Okay, and for the blood group panel, it looks like he definitely has blood type O. Very precise prediction right here. 97.7% likelihood of blood type O. It's very much precise prediction for blood type O. No other blood type is possible for him. Definitely blood type O. Well, this was the result for Native American CP18, Lapo dos Santo. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, comment, and share. I want to remind you that the link to download the raw DNA file that I was analyzing in this video will be in the description of the video. And also, I want to remind you that if you like the content, if you like the type of information that is generated with Trait Predictor, which I'm showing in the video, you can actually download the executable of Trait Predictor and you can generate this type of content, health, traits, and ancestry reports for yourself, for your own MyHeritage, Ancestry, or 23andMe file. And that executable will only cost you $25. It is on itch. The link to download this executable on itch will be in the description of the video as well. If you don't have $25 or if you don't have a Windows or a Linux system that can run it, it's okay. That can happen. In that case, there's another way you can purchase my services. You can actually use my report system where you can pay me $4 to upload your file and I will run it through Trait Predictor and I will send you your report for only $4. Or if you have 2 files, you can pay me $7 and I will send you your 2 reports for 2 files. So it's $4 for 1 report, $7 for 2 reports, and the link to that will also be in the description once again. So it's pretty cheap, $7 for 2 reports. There is no other place online that offers this kind of price for this type of service. It's really worth it. It's really worth the price. So, I'm saying just consider it. And once again, thanks for watching my videos until the very end. Leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for taking the time. Make sure you share, like, comment. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.